Hi there, everybody. Welcome to Chapter 2. So this is the week we're going to start really delving into things really more medical than actually dealing with the structure of how we're building words and all of that. I will invite you to use the study table I've provided for you. If you want to download and print that, it can be very useful in taking notes for the information we'll be covering today. If you just want to take free notes, that works too. Always keep in mind, if it's on the PowerPoint, there's a good chance it could be on the exam. If it's on the study table but not on the PowerPoint, probably not going to be on the exam. And the other way around, of course, applies as well. So, the study table is a good thing to use and take notes and study, but what appears in the slides is the material that you'll be tested on. Today we'll be talking about body structure. These will be broken into 15-minute segments. So it gives you a chance to kind of absorb material as we go. What you're looking at here is a picture of Vitruvian Man. It's an image by Leonardo da Vinci. Very fascinating character. Usually in lecture, in the classroom, I would give you some background about him, but I don't want to go too deeply into this because I don't have the materials present at the moment to give you the background. Suffice it to say that da Vinci was our first anatomist. He was the first one to be able to dissect human bodies and take them apart. Of course, this was always done post-mortem after the patient, of course, had passed from this world. And so he was able to dissect bodies, and he did our first anatomical drawing. So we owe a lot to him. You do see in red the Star of David and a flower that's been superimposed over this picture. That is not part of the original drawing. Fascinating piece of art. You can look it up online and you can find lots of information about it. And if you are curious, Leonardo da Vinci is definitely a life story to read. Not an easy one, nor is it a thin book, but it's very, very interesting. Okay, all that aside, let's start with two terms that apply to what we're doing. And by the way, we're talking about body directions today. So we're going to talk about how we break the body down in terms of how we discuss it, and how we use directional terms to find our way around the body. This deals with the aspect of anatomy, which you see here. We have the word anatomical. So we take the word anatomy, we put the AL on the end of it, and we end up with anatomical, meaning pertaining to the structure of the body. That's primarily what we'll be doing in this class. We'll be looking at a lot of anatomy. Physiology, and you'll see it represented here as physiological, pertaining to the function of the body. Physiology is something we'll brush on from time to time, but that's really more about the science and the chemical reactions and metabolism. So of course we'll brush on it, but we won't talk about it in great detail. However, anatomy is going to be very important to us. And so all things anatomical will apply. We're going to talk very briefly, basic high school biology, structural organization of the body. Consists of several structural and functional levels of organization. The complexity increases as you move to the next level, kind of like terminology. We're going to sum all this information up in a moment, so I'm going to kind of go through these slides sort of quickly. The structural organization of the body we see here. Somewhere in the beginning, there was this pool of chemicals. We don't know how, why, or where, but they were there. Cells developed from that. Cells joined together to become tissues. Tissues become organs. Organs became systems. And then, before you, the organism. The higher the level incorporates structures and functions for the previous level organizations, and all levels contribute to the function of the entire human being. And that's a very important thing. So here's our levels of organization. Cellular is the smallest structural and functional unit. Tissue refers to groups of cells that perform a specialized function. Organs are groups of tissues that perform a specialized function. So that's where the tissues form into a higher level of organization. And then we have a system. These are groups of interconnected organs that have a similar or interrelated functions. And lastly, the organism, the collection of body systems, and this is the most complex level. So put all these together and we have the living being. Typically, we're referring to humans, so we're in the realm of mammals. Let's break down some of the words we've showed you so far here today so you understand the words. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is how I'm going to be presenting words to you for the rest of the semester. Of course, this will vary, but our basic format is this. I'm going to present you a combining form. I'm going to show you how we've attached various suffixes to it. You're going to use your word building rules and your knowledge of the suffixes in order to build the words that I show you initially, and then, of course, eventually build your own words depending on what you need to say. So our first combining form of this semester, cyto means cell. Cytology is the study of cells. That study is performed by a cytologist who is a specialist in the study of cells. A cytometer is the instrument for counting and measuring cells. Cytolysis is dissolving or destruction of a cell. And cytotoxic is something that's toxic to cells. Now, as you look at these words, pay attention to your combining form. Find and isolate the suffix so you can understand how that suffix is modifying the word and how it's been attached. And one quick word about pronunciations. Let's look at our third word. Many people would be inclined to say cytometer, which it kind of looks like. However, in terminology, you'll see often that a combining form, when the suffix is added onto it, the accent and where we emphasize the word will change. So we could say cytometer, and if you said that to me, I would know exactly what you meant. If we wanted to be proper, we would say cytometer. So that's just a little clue. You'll hear me say pronunciations that are going to look slightly different than the word you see in front of you, and that's the explanation for it. Histo is a combining form that means tissue. Now we're going to use some of the same suffixes from the previous page. We're going to put logy onto histo, and we have histology, the study of tissue. That's performed by a histologist who's a specialist in the study of tissue. And histolysis is the destruction or breakdown of tissue. And up in the upper right corner here, you see some examples of tissue. When you get to anatomy and physio, for those of you who haven't taken them, or some of you may be taking them right now, in that case, I'll say a prayer for you because you're in really deep. Anyway, these are 4 types of tissue we see in the body. So these would be examined by a histologist performing the act of histology. And if they had to break some tissue down, it would be histolysis. So let's get right now to anatomical position. I showed you a picture of Vitruvian Man, which was a diagram drawn by Leonardo da Vinci in about 1480, something like that. So for around 600 years or so, we've had the same concept in how we view the human body in medicine. It's called anatomical position. You're looking at it in our description here. In the anatomical position, a person's standing erect, eyes are looking forward, arms are hanging to the side, palms and toes are facing forward. When describing the location of a point on the body, medical personnel normally refer to the body as if the patient is in the anatomical position regardless of the actual body position. What that means, and I've seen it myself many times, is when a patient comes in, and I've seen, let's say, a fractured ankle where the foot is literally pointing backwards. One foot is up, the other is to the side, or actually pointing towards the floor as the patient's lying on their back. Even though that foot's pointing the wrong direction, we still talk about it as if it were in anatomical position. So the takeaway on this one is, even if the patient literally is tied up like a pretzel and hanging upside down, we are still discussing their body structure as if they were standing like this. So that's a very important concept, because however they present, anterior meaning front, posterior meaning back, do not change. We are still talking about the front and back of the body. Superior meaning up, inferior meaning down, still means the same thing. Even though the feet might be in the air, we would still be referring to the head being superior, in other words, above the rest of the body. That'll make more sense as we go. So what I just told you don't have to commit to memory. What you need to take away from this is, however your patient is lying, we refer to them as if they were in this position, anatomical position. So, assuming that our patient is in anatomical position, we have to have ways to subdivide the body. We have many, and I'm going to give you the basic ones first, and they're called the body planes. A body plane is an imaginary flat surface that divides the body into 2 sections. We have 3 major planes to divide the body. There are actually more, to be honest with you, but we're going to start with the 3 basic ones. They serve as a point of reference. They describe the direction from which the body is being observed, and we use them extensively in radiology. Very, very true. Those of you interested in RT, those of you interested in nursing, body planes are going to be very important, because it's how we're going to talk about how we break the body down in its most basic form. Now, I just said that there were 3, and now I show you a slide that has 4, and I'll give you the differential here. So first of all, our first is the frontal, otherwise known as the coronal plane. This divides the body vertically into front and back sections. The purpose of our class, we're going to use the older term, frontal, because it's going to help you remember it divides the body into front and back sections. However, those of you moving on to radiology, get used to the term coronal. That second word in parentheses right next to frontal. No one in radiology that I've ever heard has ever said a frontal view. They always say a coronal view. So get used to that. However, for our class, frontal or coronal, either applies. So that divides the body vertically into front and back sections. Sagittal is our next term. This divides the body vertically into left and right sections. So it's exactly that. If the sagittal line is going through my shoulder and the only thing that's on one side of it is just my arm, it's still a sagittal view. It's just dividing the body into left and right sections. It might be a very small section on one side and the rest of the body on the other, but it's simply dividing into left and right. There is a caveat to that, and that's what we call the median or the mid-sagittal. This is where the rub comes in, because this divides the body vertically into equal left and right sections. So sagittal, that could be happening anywhere on the body plane that's dividing the body into left and right sections based on anatomical position. Mid-sagittal, however, will always and only ever be down the midline, so dividing the body exactly into half. That's an important concept to understand. Transverse means horizontal. This divides the body horizontally into upper and lower sections. And this diagram is somewhat useful, but I've always felt like it looks like someone got in an accident with a glass truck, and now they have patio doors sticking in 3 different directions to their body. It's a bit confusing. Let's give you something easier to look at. Here we go. These are the ones I want you to know. Sagittal, dividing the body left and right. Frontal or coronal, dividing the body from front to back. And transverse, meaning dividing the body horizontally. There you go. You've got your first set of directional terms. You have body planes, and that's all we're going to learn about body planes this semester. So once you have that down, you can move on from it and do the other directional terms. My 15 minutes is up, so I'm going to go ahead and pause this. I'm going to resume in just a moment with a fresh new batch of directional terms for you. So sit tight. I'll be back with you in just one moment.